I found the initial stages of this project challenging, and in carrying out primary research into another artist, found myself falling into the more familiar territory of the figure and portrait. I began by replicating Russell Mill's illustrations with a view to really exploring process and technique. The gestural marks were effective and helped to free my style somewhat. I then began to develop a more individual response, applying his style to different portraits. Again, a good exercise in loosening my style that can be quite tight and structured. I'm still drawn to expressive mark making in gestures, yet ultimately at this stage my work is about texture, and so this is of little benefit in advancing the project at this stage. Moving away from traditional methods and approaches, I had some wood cut and began to explore different materials, techniques and processes with the intention of creating experimental test pieces. The premise of my project is in fact a reinterpretation of mythological subject, while stylistically I am considering the practice of Russ Mills, Vaughan Oliver and in turn Kurt Schwitters. Exploring different materials on the surface of the wood, I worked with acrylic and spray paint, modelling paste and crackle paint. I played around with scale and area to add variety to the results, all with different degrees of success. Whilst in the past the focus has been on the physical work, the canvas, the paper, the physical presence of the piece, photographing the work has added a new dimension. I have enjoyed exploring the play between the finished surface and the potential for further digital manipulation and refinement, although this is the area I'm least confident with. In studying the work through the camera lens and consequently on the computer screen provides opportunities to reflect, such as on the interplay between the raised surface texture juxtaposed with the cracking surface. This is the start of the second phase of wood manipulation. Whilst pleased with the initial creations, largely because it is so far removed from our traditional practice, with reflection we felt the pieces could go further. As such, the intention here was to really exploit all of the materials and be less safe than was with the first designs. So in an effort to finally lose my seemingly inherent need to keep refining rather than really exploiting the material, I used some already distressed wood as a starting point. Again, adding texture paste and different types of paint, the surface was altered considerably. The piece is currently resting outside in the hope that nature can also further distress the work for me. This is a section of a much larger piece of wood, but I found the texture here really interesting and the effect of manipulated sections quite successful. Again, flattening the design through photographic medium has picked up subtle elements that are simply lost in the rest of the piece. The dappled contrast of the types of spray paint and the natural shadows formed by the raised sections of texture paste all add a sense of unity to the piece. Again, this is a section of a larger piece shown in the following slide. Following a similar process, I have raised sections of the original wood and have begun to consider adding less traditional materials such as sand mixed with PVA. This is definitely an area of lots of scope for further development, and I have recently begun revisiting previous pieces to further explore the texture of the work. This is the last of the wooden pieces presented here, and I have finished it as I feel it is perhaps the most accomplished in terms of surface manipulation. The darkness of the piece adds a sense of mystery and perhaps foreboding, which is apt in relation to the darker side of mythology I've been researching. Yet for me it's a personal triumph finally allowing me to work in a less polished and even finished manner. As a contrast to the preliminary studies working with wood, I decided to consider a different approach. I initially wanted to create some marbled sheets with a view to manipulating the surface of these. This I did do, but ultimately found the contrast between the oil and water more striking. Working outside on an intermittently sunny and cloudy day, the weather effects did reflect at times on the water, as is evident here. Again, the benefit of having a camera to hand to capture the immediacy of the mixing water and ink provided new opportunities to reflect on the relative success of the process, where previously I may have been focused on the final outcome. I have little photographic experience, and this is definitely something I need to work on in the future. To this point, the work has been predominantly focused on a darker, more atmospheric feeling. This piece emerged somewhat organically, but I have found it really striking in its own right. Almost scientific in appearance as if viewed through a microscopic lens, this piece therefore becomes symbolic of this whole process. Looking closer, even reimagining techniques that I have been familiar with for years. Through research into different practitioners, one name from history continually surfaces, that of the Dadaist and collagist Kurt Schwitters. As such, I have thought it beneficial to revisit his style and processes, considering found materials and offcuts of card in the studio. These were arranged with some thought, and I then applied button polish to add a layer to both aid and unify the different sections of the work. Working on a larger scale provides more space to really engage with the process and build up the different layers of the piece. I really like the addition of colour to the collage, yet could have worked harder to place the colours more effectively to enable the piece to be viewed with more clarity, but perhaps that goes against the original intention Schwitters had. I applied the polish more liberally here, and the overall effect is older and more antique in appearance. These two collages were created simultaneously and were really the first response to Schwitter's working with his designs as a guide to inform the layout. I am quite interested in the old letters and postage symbols, as there is ultimately something so personal and indeed timeless in these very delicate and tactile glimpses into past events and relationships. Almost like old diaries, they are so personal and private, yet inviting and mysterious at the same time. In approaching the topic of bridging distance, I had lots of different ideas. Our world is so consumed by problems caused by difference. I had initially wanted to respond to this concept, but it is just so broad, and the more I looked, the more disillusioned I became, and thus decided to take a more positive stance, that of the symbolism of love letters from prominent historical figures. Researching the theme of historical love letters, it became really apparent that so many exist, deeply personal and yet so widely available thanks to the internet. I like the idea of these letters, physical, tactile, and therefore juxtaposed with the speed and impersonal nature of emails and text messages today. I chose Churchill, Napoleon and Carlo, although I ran out of time on the latter and would have liked to have developed it further. Napoleon, giant of the French Revolution, military, political leader, rising to such prominence through determination and aggression, but also writer of tender and thoughtful letters to his beloved Josephine. Set against the French flag, supported by other iconic symbols of Napoleon, the work is constructed all by handmade objects. The paper, the signature, the emblems all emphasise this notion of the tactile and the physical. Following on from the style of Napoleon, Churchill's letter is again handmade and the cigar and hat drawn. The font is darker, perhaps less aged, but clearer to read, which is something to revisit with Napoleon. The idea is ultimately in the letter bridging the distance between two lovers, separated for various reasons, but the simple piece of paper helping to bring them closer.